Hey, AP class, we're going to pick up here part three of this week's reading. This is the Wednesday reading for Kafka's The Metamorphosis. Okay, so we had left off with this situation where the deputy manager had showed up to Gregor's house and is basically trying to make him explain why he didn't show up for work today. And Gregor's frantic because he can't lose this job. Once again, well, I mean, forget the fact that he's a cockroach. He's got to figure out a solution to keep his job because that's the most important thing. All right, so as we pick up here, Gregor is actually almost encouraged as he's laying there because it sounds like his family's going to try to get help and get in there. And it's kind of a telling thing that he finds this comforting because, I mean, to be honest with you, it seems like if that's the case, we should assume that our families would want to help us. If one of you was in your room, the door was locked, and your parents were, you were supposed to get up for school, and you hadn't gotten up, and your parents are banging on the door, and all they hear is this weird sound behind the door that they don't recognize, it is just kind of a given that they would be concerned. It shouldn't, be a comforting thing. It should be just the way it is. But Gregor's comforted, and that lets us know that he doesn't usually get this feeling that his family cares about him. Okay, again, we're going to parallel this with Kafka, who felt that way all the time. Constantly felt like his dad didn't care about him. So he's encouraged that his family wants to help him. It is really sad that he's excited by this prospect, to be honest with you. But it does encourage him. He's finally able to get up. He gets over to the door and with a lot of struggle is able to turn the lock. Think about it. A cockroach that doesn't have legs that are designed to do things like that. I think he uses his mouth actually in the book, but again, not something that would be designed for. And, his family's even cheering for him to do this most menial of tasks. And he's so excited about it. Again, pointing to the fact that this guy's just not patted on the back for things a lot. We're going to see later in the reading, I believe it's the Friday reading, that the very first time he gets this job and shows his parents he can help support them, they're very thankful. But after that, it becomes an obligation. They're no longer proud of him for it. It's expected. So the fact that he's being cheered on and it just means so much to him because he's getting pat on the back about anything is, again, just this way of Kafka working out his own issues through his characters. And it's really a sad scene. You can miss this. You really can. When I read this book back in 10th grade, when they forced us to read it, there was no guidance. We were just said, here's the book, read it, take a test. And I got absolutely none of this. It made no sense to me. It was just like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever read. But knowing more now has let me see into the mind of this and to see why this is such a sad story. And not just sad because the guy's a bug. To be honest with you, that might be the least sad part of it. The sad part is that when he realizes that, metaphorically, he's a bug. That the world doesn't care, his parents don't care, and he's nothing more than a cog in a wheel. And that's not what God put us on this planet to be. It just isn't. So anyway, back to this. He's able to open the door, but you can imagine what happens when the door finally opens and everyone's able to look in there and see that their loved one has been turned into a gigantic bug, or for whatever reason, there's a gigantic bug in that room. So they're terrified. All of them are terrified. And so Gregor in his mind is trying to explain himself, but of course it just sounds like he's an angry cockroach chittering away. But he immediately is like, and this is, guys, there's some comical scenes in here that are not meant to be comical, okay? It tells you a lot about how our humor has changed. He immediately starts blabbering on and on about how he's going to get dressed and get back to work and go explain himself to the company and get right back on track of doing what he's supposed to, ignoring the fact that he's a giant bug. Ignoring the fact that everyone who was to look at him would be terrified of him. Let me read you that section. In fact, listen to what's going on inside his mind. He says, I will just get dressed, pack my samples up, and be off. Sorry. Will you all allow me to go? Deputy Director, you see that I'm not obstinate and that I want to work. Traveling is demanding, but I couldn't live without it. Where do you intend to go now, Deputy Director? To the office? Yes. Will you report everything accurately? A person might be unable to work for a time, but it is precisely then that one must consider his past accomplishments and keep in mind that once the hindrance is passed, he will certainly work even harder and more efficiently. I owe a great deal to the director. You know that all too well. On the other hand, I have the care of my parents and sister. I'm in a fix, but I'll work my way out again. But please don't make it more difficult for me than it already is. Take my part in the office. I know the traveling salesmen aren't popular. People think we earn a huge amount of money and lead grand lives. This man is begging for his job. He is begging to be able to keep working. He's like, give me a break. It has nothing to do with the fact that he's a bug and he, physically cannot do this. And they need to be much more concerned about that. It comes down to him begging to keep a job that he hates. And no person should have to suffer that indignity that Gregor's facing here. I mean, it is like now he is being treated as a bug, even though he literally is one at this point. So he realizes at that point the manager is about to bolt out of there, as any of us would, and he realizes he has to stop this guy because he has a duty to his parents. He says something about his parents being accustomed. Let me see. He says, they had over the years persuaded themselves that he was guaranteed permanent employment in the company, and besides, they had so much to do in dealing with their own distress at the moment that their foresight had vanished. But Gregor had this foresight. The deputy director must be detained, calmed, persuaded, and finally won over. The future of Gregor and his family depended on it. I mean, look at the pressure this guy's put on himself. By the way, his father is able to work. His mother is able to work. His sister is able to work. I mean, I realize this is a different time period than today, but he's put all of this on his shoulders. And a lot of that's his own fault. But I mean, his society has labeled him as, you're the oldest son, this is your job. And he realizes at this point, I've got to stop this guy. Now, here's another one of the comical scenes. I want you to picture this in your head. The manager is slowly backing away from the door as he's seeing this huge cockroach. And Gregor is like, I've got to stop him. So he does what, if you or I needed to stop someone from leaving, we would move towards them to try to get them to stop, grab them by the shoulders and say, hey, stop, listen. But he's a giant bug, so as he's talking, he's just making this chittering noise and he starts running towards this guy like he's going to attack. And obviously the guy tucks tail and takes off and runs out of there. And that actually is where the reading for this section would have ended if you're following along. I do realize also that the quotes I'm reading you are not the same as what you have if you're using the material I sent you. This is from your textbook, actually. It's a different translation. It means the same things. No major issues except in some wording, okay? So if you're looking back on the material I sent, you may not have those quotes exactly, but you'll be able to pick them out still, all right? Okay, I hope you guys are doing well. We're going to stop this one, rename this file, and then kick right into the fourth part.